We want to continue the conversation about what's happening in Los Angeles right now. For that, we're joined by California Senator Alex Padilla. Senator, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us. The images over the weekend were alarming of demonstrators storming the freeway, Waymo taxis going up in flames. Several officers were injured. Monday, National Guard troops arrived and calmed things down considerably. So is President Trump on fair ground, would you say, when he says that he's restoring order to the city?
So not quite, Lindsay. Thank you for having me. I think there's a couple of important things to clarify. As not just local leaders, the governor, the mayor, but even the sheriff and the chief of police will tell you, the people out protesting peacefully during the day is very different than the crowd that shows up once the sun goes down and is responsible for a lot of the vandalism and the violence and the images that you're describing. So I don't want to say that the immigration right advocates and the organizers and demonstrators there are the ones responsible for the destructive activity. The violence and the violence needs to stop. Everybody's united in denouncing that because it's taken away from the message that they have. That's number one. Number two, let's think of why we're here to begin with. This is a crisis of Donald Trump's making. You know, the overly and increasingly aggressive actions through this immigration enforcement, the theatrics and the cruelty with which ICE and other federal agents, but look, Los Angeles is no stranger to demonstrations, to protests, to rallies and marches between the police department, the sheriff department, and other agencies in the area. They can handle this. The president of the National Guard has only escalated tensions. The threat of sending Marines is only further escalating tensions.
Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth was on Capitol Hill today and said the military deployments to Los Angeles will cost at least $135 million. Do you think you're going to be challenging that expenditure?
Well, we're challenging the expenditure, particularly if the costs are borne by the state, not the federal government. This is a crisis of Donald Trump's making.
Hegseth also asserted that he and the president have the power to send National Guard and active duty troops anywhere in the country in support of ICE agents. Your reaction to that?
Yeah, well, do they have some authorities? Of course, but only with proper justification, which they have failed to provide thus far. When Marines leadership is finding out about these mobilizations through the press, and they can't answer to us the question of what's their mission? What training have they had to execute whatever that mission is? It's not just a sign of the disorganization and the chaos of the Trump administration, but it's a threat to public safety because it makes the job of local police and local sheriffs that much more difficult.
What details can you share with us about the ICE raids that are taking place in Southern California right now? Do you have a sense of the number of the raids or the people detained, or are these strictly criminals or in some cases just, workaday people?
Look, I'll answer the second part first. These are not just criminals. Again, if it was just a targeting of dangerous criminals and violent criminals, there would be no debate, there would be no disagreement, there would be no discussion. But what's happening in practice, and what's been happening in practice since January 20th, the beginning of the second Trump administration, is far beyond that. You have otherwise innocent women, children, and fathers wrapped up in these raids. Donald Trump doesn't care. There's this artificial quota in his head that he's trying to meet, and it doesn't matter whether you're a dangerous criminal or not.
How do you respond to the fact, though, that a majority of Americans support the president's efforts to remove immigrants living here without legal documentation? This is something that really the Trump administration would say, look, this is something that Trump ran on, another example of promises made and promises kept.
Yeah, look, obviously I've seen a lot of the polls, and it all depends on how you ask the question. If you start getting into specifics, like do Dreamers deserve to be deported or do they deserve protections? Dreamers have wide bipartisan support. If you think of farm workers, for example, most of who are undocumented, do they deserve better than to live in the shadows? They're putting food on our tables. They have tremendous bipartisan support. Do you believe in due process? Something so fundamental to the democracy of our country. The vast majority of people support maintaining due process.
What is the long-term plan for, as far as California is concerned, with regard to ensuring that due process, or trying to ensure that due process actually does take place?
The congressional delegation is insisting on being able to provide our oversight role, whether it's at facilities in California, through hearings here in Congress, and over time we'll get the information. I do have formal requests into the White House for this information, for briefings, because that lack of communication, that lack of coordination with local law law enforcement especially, is only making the problem worse.
Senator Padilla, we thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Linsey.